Hey guys, welcome back to another Slightly Redneck video. Again, my name is Chris, and if you're not familiar with this channel, I help you to produce your own meat, eggs, and vegetables from your backyard, your balcony, your deck, your garage, or even a spare room in your house if that's the way you want to do it. Today we're going to be talking about quail versus chickens. Which one's better? Which one's better for you? We're going to get into all that next. Alright, so this is, let me just start off by saying this is a kind of subjective topic. I'm going to give you my opinions on which I think is best based on my situation, but it is, like I said, subjective. So it depends really on your situation, which one you like more, which one's going to work out best for you. There are benefits to both quail and to chickens. If you can do both, why not? But if you only have the choice of one, which one should you pick? It kind of depends on really what your setting is. Now, I live in town. I live in a city of about 50,000 people, a little more. Our daytime populations are pretty high because of all the people coming in for work and school and shopping and all those kinds of things. So we get up to about 200,000 people, I think, during the daytime, you know, just the traffic and all that kind of stuff. But really, residents, we're about 50,000 people. So it's not super small town. It's not a great big town, but it is a town. I have neighbors right next door to me on both sides. Fairly populous area, both, you know, across the street, everything. Most of these houses here are just right next to each other. I'm lucky I've got a little bit of space right here, but not everybody does. So if you live in a situation like me, I think quail are definitely better than chickens. And let me run through why I think that. One is, you can see my setup here. I've got two hutches here. This is an 8-foot by 3-foot hutch. I think both of them are about the same size. And in this hutch here, 8 by 3, that's 21 square feet. Is that right? 21, I can't do math very well sometimes, but you get the idea. Wait, 8 times 3, 8, 16. It's 24 square feet, isn't it? 24 square feet. Anyway, you get to see me do math. Sometimes I'm not very good at it. 24 square feet. So that means, you know, what you're averaging really is about 1 square foot per bird is a good ratio to keep your birds. You can keep them a little bit denser than that, or you can keep them less dense than that. So you could fit easily 20, 25 birds in here, probably up to 35 birds if you needed to. I usually keep it down somewhere around 15 or so, something like that. So with 15 hens and then a couple of roosters, so we're looking at, you know, well, usually I keep 15 birds, I keep about 12 hens, 3 roosters in there. So what that does for me is that produces, each one of those hens will produce pretty much an egg a day. If you keep light on them in the wintertime, they'll produce all through the wintertime too. They need 14 hours a day of light to lay. Now that holds true for chickens too. You can keep light on them and keep them laying, and they will lay pretty much an egg a day. But what that means is I get, well, you can see the eggs I collected today, and it may not look like a whole lot. These eggs are smaller than a chicken egg. So we're looking at, that's probably about the equivalent of a chicken egg. About 4 to 5 eggs, quail eggs, will equal 1 chicken egg. And today's harvest I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So, you know, a little over 2 chicken eggs worth of quail eggs out of these 2 hutches. I don't have these really packed full right now, so, you know, if I wanted to up my numbers a little bit, I could get more eggs. But really, that's about all the eggs we use. It's just me and my wife. So really, I don't need any higher numbers. If you had a bigger family and you needed more eggs, you just bump up your numbers a little bit. But this is the footprint that it takes. I could produce 15 eggs a day. That's the equivalent of about 3 chicken eggs a day out of a footprint this size right here. That's it, 8 by 3. And I've got these fairly tall. You don't have to make them nearly as tall. You could do it these lots of different ways. But that's it. That's the whole footprint that I would need to produce 15 eggs a day. Now with chickens, you're going to need a lot more room for, what did I say, how many eggs were we talking? 3 to 4 eggs a day, something like that. 3 eggs a day. So you get 3 hens, you're going to need a lot more room than that. You're going to have access to the ground. You're going to have to either have a run or some kind of tractor that you move around, because they will scratch the ground up. They'll clear it out of all the grass and everything. So it is a little bit more of a space requirement for chickens than it is for quail. And forgot where I was going next. The other big benefit to having quail for me, and I don't know if you can hear the roosters crowing in the background, keep listening, you'll hear them every once in a while, is that I can have roosters. Now, because I live in town, I could have chickens if I wanted to, for egg laying, and I could put a hutch back here with a run for them or a tractor, whatever I wanted to do in that sense, but I can't have roosters. Can't have chicken roosters because it's against city ordinance. Those roosters crowing at 5 o'clock in the morning become a nuisance pretty easily. Your neighbors are going to complain, and then the city gets called on me and I get in trouble for that. Nobody complains about the quail rooster crow. It sounds more like a songbird. It's not super loud. It doesn't wake people up. My neighbors live fairly close. My neighbor back here, there was a quail rooster crowing. I don't know if you heard that. But my neighbor on this side right here didn't even know I had quail back here for the longest time. I just happened to run into him one time. He was out here working, had his back gate open. He's got a privacy fence there. Had his back gate open. He saw my hutches. He said, "Hey, what do you have back here?" And I told him, and he said, "I didn't even know. I heard birds all the time, but I didn't know that's what it was." So you can get away with having roosters in town. Nobody's going to complain about it. You're not going to get in trouble with the city or make your neighbors annoyed, unless they're easily annoyed people anyway. And that means that I can do meat chickens, or meat birds, not chickens, meat quail, and I can do pretty high numbers. So if I get 15 eggs a day out of this hutch, save those up for about 7 days and then incubate them. You can kind of do the math in your head there, but really the hatches, you're going to look at probably somewhere around 60 or probably about 60 birds a hatch out of that if you have a decent hatch rate. 60 birds that are ready to process and go in the freezer at 8 weeks old. Now, true, it takes probably about 2 birds per meal per person, but still, that's way higher numbers than I could do with chickens. If you're trying to do meat chickens and you're trying to produce those on your own with a rooster, with chickens, laying eggs, incubating them, hatching them out, raising them up, you get a lot more. You can get a whole lot more meat out of your quail at 8 weeks old than you can at trying to raise up some chickens from eggs and keep that numbers going. Now, I can keep this going as long as I want to. I can incubate all winter long. But my point is, even if I didn't have quail, there's no way I could do meat chickens. Let me back up. I do buy meat chickens occasionally. Like usually in the spring, we'll buy a run of meat chickens and we'll run them through a tractor back here in this back lot because I've got a fairly good sized lot back here, and it's fine. But I can't do that on a consistent basis, and I can't incubate my own eggs because I can't have a rooster to fertilize the eggs. But with quail, it's no problem whatsoever. Nobody complains about that. So I can get away with keeping these in town and producing my own meat every 8 weeks if I wanted to. I mean, I can do it as many eggs as I want to set. I can jump up huge numbers, and I don't have to worry about anybody complaining. So that's another big benefit for me to having quail versus chickens. Another thing that's a big benefit about the quail is, I live a pretty busy lifestyle. I work a full-time job. I do all these things on my spare time in the evenings. And you guys saw my routine this morning. It takes me about 10 minutes to collect eggs, make sure the birds are fed and watered, and that's it. That's my whole routine for the day. Now, I do spend a little bit more time. I come out here and I clean out the hutches every once in a while. It takes about an hour, maybe, something to do, and every once a month, something like that. Because for the most part, the droppings fall down below the cages here. Max, get out of there. Sorry, my dog likes the droppings every once in a while. He likes to dig the quail food out of it, and I don't want him eating it. It's kind of nasty. But the droppings fall down below, and I really only have to clean that up about once a year. So there is a section over here that is closed off. You probably saw in the intro of the video. Get back. You probably saw it in the intro of the video. And that does collect some of the droppings, but they're dry. They're not runny. They're not wet like chicken droppings are. They're much drier, and they're much easier to clean up. That only needs cleaned out about, like I said, once a month, something like that. It takes about 20 minutes or something to clean that out. And what I use is, let's see, do I have my screen up here? Let me get it, hang on. This is what I use to clean it out with. It's just a screen. Because these boxes are sand, I just scoop up the sand in there, sift out the sand. The droppings stay on the screen, dump them in a bucket, go throw them in the compost pile. It's pretty easy, pretty straightforward and simple process to do. With chickens, there is a little bit more involved with taking care of them, depending on how you do it. It's not hugely more. I mean, you can reduce that down pretty, to less time. But it is a little bit more work with chickens than it is with quail to take care of them and to make sure they're taken care of. Especially if you've got them in the type of where you're letting them out into a run a day. You have to put them back up at night. All those kinds of things. This is pretty easy setup. If I'm going to be gone for a week and I want somebody to come over and take care of things. Pretty simple, straightforward, easy way. It's not hard to find somebody that can do that for me. Whereas taking care of chickens while you're gone, maybe a little bit more work. And another benefit, I don't know if this is a benefit or not to keeping quail, is that it's just unusual. Not a lot of people keep quail. So when you tell people you keep quail, you always start a conversation up. You always have to talk to them and say, well, I'm not keeping bob whites or wild quail. I'm keeping Coturnix. Explain that to them. It's just kind of a fun conversation starter. It's an interesting thing to share. You bring quail, deviled quail eggs to a party, and I tell you what, everybody's like wondering where you got those from. They think they're the best thing ever. It's just, you become the center of attention for a little while, which could be a good thing or a bad thing, depending on who you are. That's not necessarily reason to raise them. It's just kind of an interesting thing I thought I'd share with you a little bit. All right, let's talk about chickens though, because there are some benefits to keeping chickens. Chickens, for example, will pretty much eat all your kitchen scraps. You throw them out there and they'll eat them up. Now, quail will do that to an extent, but not like chickens will. Chickens are much more, what do you call that? Much more vigorous eaters when it comes to those kinds of things than your quail are. Same things with garden pests, bugs around the house. You can let your chickens kind of free range if you have a fenced in area for them so they don't get out, and they will clean up the bugs. Now, again, quail will do that a little bit, but trying to free range a quail is next to impossible. You're probably not going to be able to do that. They are just at the lowest of the food, the food chain, and become, every predator out there wants to eat your quail. And chickens get big enough that, yeah, you're going to still have some predator pressure on that, but a lot of your predators that would go after your quail, small rat snakes and some of those kinds of things, won't go after a chicken because they're just too big. Not only that, but a chicken would just tear up a snake, whereas your quail would become dinner for the snake. So, there are some benefits to keeping chickens. You can use them if you use them. You could build like a Joel Salatin style chicken tractor where you're throwing all your scraps and all your weeds and all that kind of stuff in there, and those birds are turning it into compost, and you're moving that and getting finished compost pretty quickly out the back end of it. You can do that with chickens where you couldn't do that with quail. Chickens will scratch all that stuff up. Now, that's a good and a bad thing. You can't just let them run loose in your garden because they'll tear up your garden scratching it up. But at the end of the season, when your garden's done, you can let them run loose in there and they will de-weed it for you, and they'll get the bugs out of it, all that kind of stuff. So there are some ways to use chickens where you can't use quail, and you can do a lot more with chickens. But that probably doesn't apply to most people that live in town. That's probably more of an issue, or more of a situation where if you live out in the country with a lot of land, and you don't have neighbors real close to you. That's probably more of a situation that's going to work in. Living in town, it's a little bit more difficult to get away with some of those kinds of things, because if you get a chicken that jumps over the fence, gets into the neighbor's yard and tears up the rose bush or their garden plot or whatever, you're going to have a problem on your hands. With the quail, if one does get out, nobody ever even knows. I mean, it probably just disappears and probably gets eaten by a cat or something like that, but nobody even knows about it. And if they do, they just think it's a bird. They don't think it's they don't really think anything of it, so it's not a big deal. So, again, there are benefits to chickens. They do lay bigger eggs, so it's not, these eggs too, these are a little bit difficult to deal with if you're not used to it. This is the average size of a quail egg right here. That's not a super big egg or a super small egg. That's probably about average size you're going to get out of them. So it does take, like I said, about 5 of these to equal 1 chicken egg. And they don't crack like a regular chicken egg. You can't just crack it over the edge and break it open like you would a regular chicken egg. They do make special scissors, which I have. They're super cheap and easy to find. You just order them off Amazon. $1 or $2 a piece, maybe $4, I don't know. But they work kind of like a cigar cutter. You just cut the top of the egg off, dump it out. It's pretty easy to deal with, but it is a little bit more difficult than dealing with a chicken egg where you can just crack and break it open and dump it in the pan. So what I usually do is I'll snip the top of these off, dump them in a bowl, get 5 or 6 together, pour it in a pan, and then fry it like one big egg with multiple yolks. There is a little bit higher yolk content to a quail egg versus the white of the egg than there is to a chicken egg. So I kind of like that because I like the yolks quite a bit. But you may be somebody that's just, if you're used to chicken eggs, that may be a little bit different. If you like hard-boiled eggs, these make perfect little hard-boiled eggs, bite-sized. You just pop them in your mouth, and they hard-boil super fast, 4 minutes to hard-boil a quail egg. They are a little bit more difficult to peel than a chicken egg, but not that much more, just slightly more. And one more thing I should point out is that if you have chickens for egg laying, they're generally not going to be good meat chickens. So that kind of goes back to the producing, dual purpose birds. These guys produce eggs and are a good meat producer as well. Get them up to about 8 weeks old and they're ready to process and put in the freezer. Super easy to raise. don't have really high mortality rates in them or any of those kinds of things. Not that you would in chickens necessarily, but most chickens that people keep for egg laying purposes are not good dual purpose birds. They don't make good meat birds either. So if you wanted to do meat birds, you'd have to kind of do those as a separate thing. If you want to have a self-sustaining, in a sense, kind of setup where you have a rooster that fertilizes the eggs that you then incubate and you hatch out, raise the chicks up, and then process them as they become full-grown birds and put them in the freezer. You know, that's a little bit more difficult to do with chickens than it is with quail, because the breeds of birds that you can get dual purpose out of are a little bit more limited. There are some out there. There are some chickens that are considered dual purpose that would make a good meat producer and a good egg producer, but your grow out times are much longer than 8 weeks as well. And to do the high numbers that you can do with quail, it just takes a lot more room and a lot more space. I kind of rambled there. I'm not sure if that was really straightforward, and hopefully that point kind of makes sense. So in my opinion, especially if you live in town, quail are a clear winner over chickens. And if nothing else, if I ever decided to get some chickens for egg laying or something like that, I would still keep quail on hand, because the meat production that you can get out of them is so much better than what you can get out of a chicken. Plus, I think the meat on the quail really tastes a little bit better than a chicken. It's more of it's a darker meat. It's more closely related to dove. If you've ever eaten dove, it's got more flavor to it than a chicken breast or any of those kinds of things do. So, granted, you don't get as much meat off of these birds as you do off of a chicken, because they're much, much smaller. But 2 of these birds for dinner is easily enough for, you know, if you put other things with it, it's easily plenty of food to eat. And it, like I said, I think it tastes a little bit better than chicken does. So anyway, those are my thoughts really kind of all in all on whether you should raise quail or you should raise chicken. I think there are reasons to do both. I think chickens, if I had more land, if I lived out in an area where I was, you know, outside of city limits, out in the country, and I didn't have neighbors super close, then I would definitely keep some chickens on hand, and I would let them free range in my yard and keep the bugs under control and all those kinds of things. But I can't do that in town. It's a little bit more difficult to do in town than it is to do out in the country. But I would still have quail. I think that quail are the clear winner when it comes to, you know, what you want to do on a typical homestead, and that's meat production and egg production. Quail win out over chickens in my book. So I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe your opinions are different. Let me know in the comments below. I have not been good in responding to comments, but I do see the comments. I do read the comments, and a lot of times that's where I get my video ideas from. So if you have a question or something that you need to get answered that you haven't seen in one of my videos, or you got a video idea, leave it in the comments below. I'll see that. It'll come through email. It just usually comes through at a time where I can't go in and respond to it, and there's plenty of reasons why I haven't been good at responding to comments lately. The other thing I will say is don't forget about my Thursday night live broadcast. If you have questions, you need some help with something, with your quail, with your meat rabbits, with your gardening, any of those kinds of things, join me on Thursdays, 7 o'clock Central. Almost every week I'm there. Sometimes things get in the way and I can't make it, but I'm almost always live for about an hour, 7 o'clock Central, Thursday evenings, right here on YouTube. And I do my best to respond to all the chat that comes in during the live chat. Usually get it all. So we get a lot of questions answered. You can also join the Facebook group, the Slightly Redneck Facebook group. I'm not active in social media at all. I very seldom ever post or anything, but that group is pretty big. We've got a lot of people in there, and they're very helpful with answering your questions, even though I'm not necessarily the best at that, and I apologize for that. You can get your questions answered in the group. People will respond to you and get you answered. And if you run into a problem in there where somebody's being a jerk or any of those kinds of things, report it to me. I do kind of monitor that stuff. When it gets reported, I'll go in and I'll delete people if they're being jerks. If they're spamming or any of those kinds of things, I'll take care of that. Oh, and I almost forgot. Some of you guys asked about Max, how he was doing. And quick. He's all wound up all of a sudden. All right, heel. No, heel. Max, you're not doing it. Heel. There we go. Good boy. Get him all calmed down, then we'll talk about it. Several of you asked about him, wanting to know how he was doing, his back right paws, what you were concerned about in the last video. You might see him as he walks right. Yes, come. Good boy. You can see he's doing fine. He's got plenty of energy. He is limping a little bit on this leg right here. He basically, and you might be able to see this line right here where he was shaved down. He had surgery. There's a little bit of a scar still left right there. He had surgery on his knee. He basically did the equivalent of blowing out his ACL. But that's been about a month and a half ago. So he's recovering pretty well. He's still working on building his muscle back up in that leg right there. But all in all, I mean, he still lifts it up, just kind of holds it up in the air when he's just standing around. He kind of has a little bit of a limp on that leg, but you can see he's perfectly fine. So appreciate the concern, but no worries, he's doing all right. All right, again, thank you guys for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. As always, God bless.